So my name is Lotte Beatrix Crawford. I'm an art and design historian. I am studying at Coventry University for a PhD on Enid Marx. I originally became very interested in Enid Marx when I studied illustration at Kingston University, and I realised that there was a whole generation of interwar designers, and particularly women, who people didn't really know anything about. And around the same time I became familiar with the collection in Compton Verney where Enid Marx has her folk collection, and I just became fascinated by it. So in about 1927 she became a fully launched designer of handmade, hand-produced textiles, and previously she trained at the Central School for 1 year and then the Royal College of Art between 1922 and 1925, where she was taught by Leon Underwood and Paul Nash. So she kind of developed a sense of modernism and angularity, and she was also a member of a kind of very interesting, cohesive circle of designers like Eric Villiers and Edward Borden and Peggy Angus, and also she was in the painting school, so she also was involved with Barbara Hepworth and Henry Moore, so she's kind of developing a sense of kind of British modernism in that period. And then at that time she had been involved with creating wood engravings, so that kind of naturally led on to an interest in repeated pattern textiles that were made by woodblocks. When she became involved with a particular group in the interwar period, so she remains kind of in contact with Baron and Larcher through work that she sold in particular galleries, shop galleries in that time. And she also had a connection through Baron and Larcher and those kinds of shops to Ethel Marais. And it was actually the weaver Ethel Marais who suggested Enid Marx to be involved with the utility movement and utility textiles, because Gordon Russell went to see her to ask for potential suggestions, and the first suggestion was Marion Straub, but for whatever reason Straub didn't want to be involved with utility, and so Enid Marx was suggested, and she was given the job in, I think, 1945. Enid Marx's work really reflects the conditions of utility, which were to use materials highly effectively with very small repeats so that materials couldn't be wasted. There's a familiar kind of zigzag pattern, which you could argue comes from a kind of African stylization of patterning, and also a synthesis of kind of dots and linear motifs that you can see reflected in her earlier work. So in the interwar period, Enid Marx really gained a kind of following and a kind of dynamic. She was working very effectively as an independent designer and kind of in a group of other women designers. It was a period where the war had led to kind of a tragic loss of life of men, but that kind of enabled women to kind of develop their own skills. They were also, Enid Marx is one of the first generation of women to be able to be arts educated and to sell her work commercially. She became a Royal Designer of Industry in 1944, so she was decorated and recognised for her work in her lifetime. But by the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, she begins to fall out of fashion to an extent that happens in design. But her actual legacy and the lack of it, and the lack of awareness of Enid Marx, I think, is much more representative of her position as a woman designer and what comes after the war, which is a kind of pushback really for women when kind of men kind of muscled back into jobs and occupied high positions, and also of a kind of legacy of abstraction and legacy of modernism, which is very masculine dominated. And some of these binaries we've been trying to unpick for 30 years, but still the idea that women couldn't be abstract, that if they did decorative work that they couldn't actually occupy a position in modernism, has been very damaging for the legacy of these kinds of women, and also perhaps a kind of attraction towards American modernism and German modernism, and not necessarily British modernism, which hopefully will gain more exposure in the future.